Okay, so as we said, from the beginning here we have numbered sentences, okay? And here we have the question about sentence placement, and it's sentence number 3. We should keep that in mind so that we can answer the question easily and quickly. Now, the recent precipitous decline of print journalism as a viable profession has exacerbated. Now, this word, we just came across this word in the previous passage. So, long-held concerns about the state of investigative reporting in the United States. So here we have this word that I'd like to talk about, precipitous. It means fast or great. And here we are talking about what we are talking about, a fast decline of print journalism. Okay? So the recent precipitous decline of print journalism as a viable profession has exacerbated long-held concerns about the state of investigative reporting in the United States. Now, facing lower print circulation and diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. So this is happening as a result for that decline. So here we have many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. Now, newspapers, the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. So as you can see here, first, in number 3, we have newspapers. So that's a very general term. After that, here we have many major newspapers, and that's something a little bit more specific. And as you know, every paragraph goes like this, like an inverted funnel. We start with something general and then we narrow it down to go to something specific. So I don't think that the original sequence of the ideas here is okay. Let's continue with the paragraph and then we can answer the question. So, number 4, to survive, investigative journalism must continue to adapt to the digital age. All right, so the whole idea here in this paragraph is that now because we have many news online, the print journalism and newspapers are having a great decline as a viable profession. Okay, so let's go to the options now. A, shall we keep it where it is now? No, because as we said, it starts with a general term, newspapers, defined as the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism. And in number 2, we have many major newspapers. That's something more specific than newspapers in general. So it doesn't work like this. Should we take sentence number 3 and place it before sentence number 1? No. Why? Because print journalism, again, is more general than newspapers. So I cannot start the paragraph with it. After sentence 1, yes, because here we have a very general idea of print journalism, and then a little bit more specific, newspapers in general, and then even more specific, many major newspapers. So I can place it after sentence 1. Deleted from the paragraph, there will be something missing, right? Because if I just say facing lower print circulation and diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. It works, but again, you will see that there's something missing. So D doesn't work. So the best place for sentence number 3 is to be placed after sentence 1. Okay? Let's move on. Now, it's not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. Their work is expensive and time-consuming, right? All right, so here the question, number 35, as you can see, it's about punctuation. So it's not difficult to understand why. So what do we expect to find after that? A clarification, right? Explanation. So here they are telling us it's not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. Their work is expensive. That's the first reason, right? And time consuming, and that's the second reason. So as you can see, what do we have after this part? We have the reasons. We are giving a clarification or an explanation why this publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. That's number one. Number two, look, here we have the possessive S, all right? But here we are talking about reporters in as a noun, right? We are talking about a plural noun, so that doesn't work. Now, if this option didn't have this apostrophe, then it works, right? Because for a clarification, we can use a colon, and we said an alternative way, we can use a dash. But what makes A wrong is the apostrophe here. So A doesn't work. And because D contains apostrophe as well, is wrong. And of course, it contains a semicolon, which cannot be used because we don't have a complete sentence after it. So it's either a comma or a colon. Which one do we use for setting up a clarification? Of course, the colon. So B is the best answer for question 35. Okay, great. Let's move on. Now, taking on the public interest. As you can see here, we started this sentence with a phrase. That's why we should separate it from the rest of the sentence with a comma, and it works as a modifier. So who's taking on the public interest? It's investigative journalism. So that's the modifier, and that's the target or the subject of the modifier. So investigative journalism involves original, often long-form reporting on such topics as illegal activities, street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption. So here it's just about the phrase itself. It's about the word choice. Shall we say taking on, undertaken in, overtaking, or taking off from? So it depends on the meaning of that phrase. Now, taking on, it means confronting or attacking. Okay? So attacking the public interest or confronting the public interest, they do that because of this? Of course not. They are doing it for the public interest. So they are doing it as something positive, not negative. So I cannot choose A. Undertaken in the public interest, like it is done for the public interest, yes, B works. C, overtaking. Now, overtaking, it means controlling. So are or is the investigative journalism trying to control over the public interest? Again, no. Taking off from the public interest, here, if I say taking off, I need to ask myself, what are they taking off from the public interest? There is nothing like that there. It's not mentioned. It's not discussed at all. So D doesn't work as well. And the best answer is B. So in this structure now, I can say that done in the public interest, investigative journalism involves original, often long-form reporting on such topics as what? Now after that, as you can see here, we have a list of examples, right? So on such topics as illegal activities, street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption. Now looking at the structure here in this list and the options that we have, you should know that this question is about redundancy, right? Why? Let me tell you. Because if I keep it as it is, illegal activities, as part of the list, what is a street crime? It's an illegal activity. Corporate wrongdoing, the same thing, it's an illegal activity. And political corruption as well. So here, I'm just like putting the general idea in the list with the specific points, and that doesn't work. It's redundant, right? So it doesn't work. B, business scandals. Now, business scandals might be tempting, but isn't it the same or similar enough to corporate wrongdoing? Yes, it is. So adding it again will lead to redundancy. C, abuse of government power. Again, it seems tempting that we can use it in the list, but isn't it the same or similar enough to political corruption? Yes, it is. So using it will be redundant as well. So just delete this part. And in the list, we will have these examples: cream strike, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption. All right. So let's just skim very quickly the rest of the paragraph. So, an investigative story involves one or more experienced journalists dedicating their full energy and the resources of the publisher to a piece for a prolonged period of time. Expensive legal battles may ensue. Now, the results of this work, though costly, have helped keep those in power accountable. So the negative side about this kind of legal research is expensive, and that's something negative, right? But the positive side is that these reports kept those in power, like the politicians and the governments, accountable. So they will be careful about the actions that they take, right? Now, the exposure by Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of government misconduct in the Watergate scandal resulted in the resignation of President Richard Nixon in 1974. So as you can see here, we have one example telling us that because of the power of these reports, in one example, the President of the United States resigned, like he quit. That's number one. So the first example happened in 1974. Now, and this is a very important piece of information here, the date. We need to focus on that. Now, more recently, which means after 1974. So here, what do we have? We have the idea of sequence. And that will help us to answer question number 38. Now, more recently, Seymour Hersh, reporting for The New York in 2004, helped publicize the mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners by US personnel at Abu Ghraib during the Iraq War. So when did this happen? In 2004. Now, here we have this question now. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. Let's read it. In 1954, Edward R. Murrow and Fred Friendly produced episodes of the CBS television show See It Now that contributed to the end of the U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist witch hunts. All right? Shall we add this sentence or not? Of course, as you can see here, the main idea is that these legal investigations and reports by these different newspapers led to making the people in power be accountable, right? And then they are giving us examples. So here we have another example. Does it work or not? First of all, as we said, the first example mentioned was in 1974. The second one in 2004. So if we need to add another example, it should follow the chronological order of the events. And here, if you look at it, it's in 1954. It's even before the resignation of Richard Nixon, right? So when we talk about sequence of the paragraph, it doesn't work. That's the first reason. I cannot add it. Now the second one, all the examples here that we have are about printed newspapers, while this example is about a television show, right? So it's not consistent with the type of examples that we are using in the paragraph. That's the second reason that makes it wrong. We don't need to add it. So A and B are wrong. We don't need to add this sentence. Now we just need to find the best reason, as usual. No, because it gives an example that's both chronologically, again about time and sequence, and substantively out of place in the paragraph. Yes, That's what we said, because it's not related to the sequence or even the type of examples that we are using in the paragraph. So C works. But let's check D. No, because it provides an example that is inconsistent with the passage's definition of investigative journalism. Are we talking about the definition of investigating journalism here? No, that's not the focus of the paragraph. So D is wrong. And as we said, the best answer for this question is C. Now we still have one question here. So I need to zoom out a little bit. Okay, great. Now, in these and other cases, exposure from reporters has served as an important blockade to or scolding of malfeasance. Now, malfeasance, it means misconduct, misbehavior. Okay, malfeasance, it means misconduct. So if we look at the original phrase that we have here and the other ones, it's about word choice. So from our understanding of the whole context of the paragraph, we know that these reports acted in a way that was in the interest of the people. Okay, we said that earlier, that these reports worked in the public interest. Okay, so that served as what? As an important blockade to or scolding of malfeasance. Now here, blockade, it means when you surround something, especially a country, when you want to attack the country, right? Or something similar. You are surrounding something, or scolding, telling off, right? In the context here, it doesn't work, okay? I cannot say scolding of misconduct or malfeasance. So A doesn't work. B, interference to or condemnation of, again, it doesn't work. Drag on or reproof of. Now, first of all, it's kind of informal and it doesn't fit the style of the paragraph. So it doesn't work. And the best answer here is D. Deterrent. Now, deterrent, it's something that stops people or stops things generally from doing something, right? Or rebuke to. Now, rebuke is similar enough to scolding, but it's more formal, right? So here actually we are talking about the context, and we are talking about the style, formality, the register, and D is the best one because it gives us the correct meaning with the suitable level of formality. Okay, now while worrisome, the decline of traditional print media could not entail the end of investigative journalism. Let's see what question number 40 is about. So here they are telling us, which choice most effectively suggests that the end of investigative journalism is a real possibility, but one that can be prevented. So we need to use a modal verb. As you can see, all the options here are about modal verbs: could, need, will, must. Now, the modal verb that we need to use here is the one that tells us that this idea of the end of investigative journalism is possible, but it's not, it's something that can be avoided. I'm just looking for the word. What was the word? Yeah, inevitable. It's not something inevitable. We can prevent it, right? It's possible, but at the same time, it can be prevented. It's not inevitable. Now, if I say that the decline of traditional print media could not entail the end of investigative journalism, could not, it gives us that for sure that it can be prevented. And that's not the case. Remember, we need to follow the exact wording of the question. It's not 100% or even 50, 70%. We are sure that this will not entail the end of investigative journalism. So it doesn't give me the exact meaning that I want. Okay? Need. Now, if I just use need here and I say, while worrisome, the decline of traditional print media need not entail, yes, it works. Because if I say that this thing need not end, then need in this situation with not means doesn't necessarily. Okay? And it works here. So doesn't necessarily entail the end of investigative journalism. In this way, I'm saying that it's possible, but at the same time, it can be prevented. Will? No. Must? Again, no. So the best answer is B. So that's a very that's a very specific question. We need to understand what they want us to do, and then we can choose the best answer. Now let's go to the next one. Now, although many newsrooms have reduced their staff, some still employ investigative reporters. So this is the underlined sentence, and let's see what they want us to do. Which choice most effectively sets up the examples in the following sentences? Okay, great. So now I know that in the following sentences we have examples, and I need the best way to introduce or to set up these examples. So what should I do? I need to go through the examples mentioned there, see what they are really about, and then choose the best introduction for those examples. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Now, non-profit enterprises such as, so as you can see here, that's the first example. The organized crime and corruption reporting projects have begun to fill the void created by staff losses at newspapers and magazines. So it's about filling the void. As we said, we have now many reporters leaving this job because we have a fast and dramatic decline in print journalism as a profession, right? So how are they going to fill the gap? Let's see here. Enterprising freelancer reporters, newly funded by nonprofits, make extensive use of social media. That's the first method they are using to replace or to fill in the gap that we have in this profession. So the use of social media, including blogs and Twitter, to foster a public conversation about key issues. So that's the first example, using social media as blogs and Twitter. Now let's see the second one. The Help Me Investigate project, for example, solicited readers to submit tips and information related to ongoing stories to its website. Again, it's about using the internet. Far from marking the end of investigative journalism, cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens has been facilitated by the advent of the digital age through an increase in the number of potential investigators. Okay, so now I have a general idea of the examples mentioned in this paragraph, and the whole idea is about filling the gap that's created because of the losses in the profession of print journalism. So, if I go to the original one that we have in the paragraph that says, although many newsrooms have reduced their staff, some still employ investigative reporters? No, because the focus of these examples is about using the internet as an alternative method to have this kind of news. So A doesn't work. B. Investigative journalism also declined between the 1930s and 50s, only to be revived in the 1960s. How does that help? Does it tell us about the idea of filling the gap? No, so it doesn't work. I just need to scroll down a little bit. Now, according to the Pew Research Center, more people get their national and international news from the internet than from newspapers. Now here the internet is mentioned, right? But there's a trap. What is that a trap? It's the comparison trap. We said that like either in reading or in writing. Sometimes they give you tricky options, but they are wrong because the comparison doesn't make sense and it's not directly mentioned in the passage. Okay, so I cannot say that. And here the focus is on the comparison only between the internet, the newspaper, and the newspaper. But we already said that the focus is about how to fill the gap that's created in this profession. So although it can be tricky, it's wrong. So the only option that's left is D. Let's read it. Indeed, recent years have witnessed innovative, something new, adjustments to changing times. And that works. Now, because we have the digital age, something mentioned in the passage, since we have the advent of the digital age and we have the social media and we have the internet, then we are making innovative adjustments. And that's the best answer here. After mentioning that, I can talk about how people used social media, Twitter, blogs, and other websites. Now, 42. Non-profit enterprises such as the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. So it's about such as, and as you can see here, it's about punctuation. Now, can we keep it as it is? As we said, guys, such as is a conjunction or a transitional word that we use to introduce examples, right? We all know that. And we said there are two styles. The first one, I can use a comma. I can say such as, and then I say the examples, 1, 2, for example, and 3, right? But here we need to use another comma, and this will be considered an appositive phrase, right? The other one, the same thing. The only difference is that we don't consider it additional information. So I use such as 1, 2, and 3, right? But here I don't use commas. Why? Because the information included in this phrase or in this list is something considered to be essential information. Okay, so both situations work, either to use commas or not. It depends on the meaning you want to communicate, whether this list gives us just additional information or something essential. Okay, now in A, it gives us the second choice, that it's just using such as essential information. Okay, and the list, of course, that comes with such as. So I can say that A works. B, do you use a colon before such as? Of course not. After such as? No. Why? Because we can use a colon, of course, to introduce a list. But why do we have to use two things, such as and a colon? Only one is enough. And we had a similar question earlier. Enterprises, comma, such as. Now we said that we can use a comma before such as, right? But there should be another one after the list ends, so that it can be considered an appositive phrase. But if you read here, non-profit enterprises, comma, such as the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, look, here we don't have another comma. So using a comma here will be extra and unnecessary. So I cannot choose D, okay? If there were a comma at the end of the phrase, then yes, D works. But since we don't have a comma at the end of the phrase, I cannot use one at the beginning. So I don't need any kind of punctuation here. No change is the best answer. Question 43 is about transitional words. So now the help me investigate project, for example, of course, look here, it's used an appositive phrase. Solicited readers to submit tips and information related to ongoing stories to its website. Now, we already know that this is just a second example of the idea of how people use different methods for news, right? So does it work? Yes, it does. Therefore, shows us the relationship of cause and effect, which we don't have here. However, for contrast, something again we don't have here. In any case, doesn't work in this context. So A is the best option. No change. We are just introducing this sentence as another example for the idea mentioned earlier in this paragraph. Now, far from marking the end of investigative journalism. Cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens has been facilitated by the advent of the digital age through an increase in the number of potential investigators. And then we have other options. So, as you can see, when we have such a question, then it's about the structure generally. We need to use a structure that's concise, precise, and neat generally, okay? So A is a little bit wordy. Let's see if we have something else that's better, okay? Now, B, the number of potential investigators has increased since the advent of the digital age, owing to the facilitation of cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens. Now, again, owing to the facilitation of, that's wordy, right? I can just say something else, like, for example, as it's already mentioned here, has been facilitated by, but owing to the facilitation of, again, is word. It doesn't work. Now, the advent of the digital age has increased the number. So as you can see, look, we have this result. The advent of the digital age has increased because of what? Because of the number of potential investigators. Okay, how? So here we have effect, here we have cause, and here we have how. How did that happen? By facilitating cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens. So all the ideas here connected perfectly, and as you can see, it's not wordy. The structure is neat and short, so I can choose C. But let's check D. Now, by facilitating cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens, the advent of the digital age has increased the number of potential investigators. Now here, again, it's short, right? But does it give us the original meaning that we need? Because here, we are talking about, just a second, increase in the number of potential investigators. This happened because of the advent of digital age that facilitated the cooperation. Here now, by facilitating cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens, the advent of the digital age has increased the number of potential investigators. There is another issue here, which is the comma. Okay, now here, by facilitating cooperation among journalists and ordinary citizens, there should be a comma here. The advent of the digital age has increased the number of potential investigators. So D doesn't work as well. There is something missing in the structure. And the best answer for 44 is C.